Hi, everyone. Welcome to this breakout room, the Building Coalitions. I'm just going to turn it over to Leanna and Jason. I believe that there are some discussion questions afterwards, but we can just start with a presentation.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm Leanna Frick. I have been with my tool library here in Baltimore, Maryland for 9.5 years. I'm now a staff co-director. I'm also the chair of the brand new Tool Library Alliance and the chair of the steering committee for our state makerspace association. So this is work I love. Jason?
I'm Jason Naumann. I've been a librarian volunteer for the last 10 years or so in Portland, Oregon. I started out working with the Greenlands Community Tool Library and just started a new library out here in Gresham, which is just east of Portland. Also working with the Portland Library Things Network and the Tool Library Alliance as a partnership lead. So excited to be here. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah, amen. And our goal is to use our limited personal experience with building coalitions to frame some basic steps that we've found to be important, and then to kick off conversation about the kinds of coalitions that you are building, want to build, how we do it together. So the Tool Library Alliance is the one I'll be talking about today. And like I mentioned, it's really new. So we're coming up on just a year, although many of us in the Alliance have been in touch for many, 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 many years. This is our first year as a formal coalition. So we had our first call in January and just created our steering committee officially in October. And I want to shout out Shareable, which Tom Llewellyn is here as a representative for being both a catalyst and a partner with us in forming the coalition. Tom also co-founder of the Asheville Tool Library. Who we are is we are independent, so non-municipal library organizations, libraries of things in the US that have been operating for at least 2 years and lend tools. So that's the criteria for our coalition. We are currently all volunteer. We're led by an elected steering committee. That is always a little messy at the beginning, but that's where we ended. And our mission is to unite tool libraries across the United States to foster community resilience, increase sustainability, build a culture of generosity through the sharing of tools, skills, and knowledge. So in a lot of ways, we take what a tool library does and we amplify it to the coalition to foster co-learning and sharing. These are our goals. This is also available on our website. I won't read these all to you, but coming up with goals was really important for our coalition. At the beginning, our very first conversation was like, what could we do together? And it was a huge list. Jason, maybe you weren't in that first meeting, but it was like a full page of things we could be doing together if we worked together. So a lot of the work was honing it, narrowing it, categorizing things to give us some focus. But some things that you may find in any coalition are leveraging collective power, right? So together, just like we heard from the Right to Repair folks, we can do more with legislation, we can do more with purchasing. Often we are stronger together. The other thing that we went back and forth with, because our definition includes only established libraries, we wanted to balance the benefit, the value add for established tool libraries with also helping to foster and incubate new tool libraries. So some coalitions may be focused more on expansion. I know replication and scalability is a big topic in this conference, but we wanted to make sure that we had a hand in that while also making sure that we maintained the benefit for established libraries.
Yeah, and I would just add, as a member, it's been something that comes up in every meeting that we have, what a value it is to have that community and to be able to ask questions and talk about difficult situations with other experienced folks who are working in that space.
Yeah, and one of the challenges all of us face is that we get asked for advice all the time. So trying to streamline that is also an internal benefit when we get there. I'm not going to go through the whole timeline. I really just wanted to highlight this third row. This get to know you phase was really long for us, and it could have been much longer. And for other coalitions I worked with, it is years of just getting to know each other, building relationships, understanding what brings you together, what your complementary strengths and needs are. And so I would say, don't be afraid to spend that time on that process and make it explicit. So to summarize very briefly, the steps that I've found, and Jason and I talked through this, are, I think, somewhat universal when building a coalition. So first you need to find your people, right? Build a list of contacts. This is often very organic. And in our first year, a lot of this get to know you time was also people saying, well, oh, I've heard of this library in Minnesota. We should contact them. Or, I know this library that may not quite fit, but let's contact them. So just building that list of contacts so that you have a critical mass of people to get started. And then defining what unites you. Every group member is a little bit different. But we found those commonalities in being US based, which is important for us for things like insurance and legislation that are specific to our country. That we all lend tools. There's lots of kinds of libraries of things. That we are not part of a municipal library system. Hazel can talk lots about that in our next session. That we find what our commonalities are, and then we also define what we're not. So that the size of the umbrella is up to you, but defining those edges can help keep your group focused and keep you focused on those commonalities. We spent a lot of our first few meetings sharing our goals, challenges, and strengths. So we created an inventory, just a spreadsheet with what software are you using and what is working and what is not. What is your membership model? How much do you charge? Like really trying to explicate the pain points and also the things that every library is doing something the best. And so finding who is an expert in repair events or educational programming or repairing their own libraries. Jason's the expert in many of these things, I realize. But finding those matches between the needs in the group and the skills in the group. And then also the goals that everybody has. So like insurance is a challenge for all of us, being able to identify that that's something we can work on together. I also think it's important to identify those short-term or ongoing value adds and the long-term goals. So we have short, medium, and long-term goals for our group that help keep it valuable and feel like it's worth our time in the short term, while we also work towards things like, can we get actuarial charts for what we do so that insurers know what it is that they're insuring? And then figuring out this meeting and communication structure that builds community and enthusiasm as you go. So having every session be just about work means you're not going to get to know each other. You're not going to build those relationships. And finding ways for people to be in touch just casually. The coalitions I've worked with that are good at connecting people as human beings tend to be stickier. Eventually though, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, the members that have the most capacity to really participate and are most enthusiastic about that process can really be helpful guiding some of those goals and setting those different timelines. You can just accomplish a lot quickly when people are enthusiastic about it and they have those skill sets, and then, set other goals a little bit further down the path.
Yeah. And ideally your coalition is going to grow. And so setting goals that require skills in people you don't have yet is okay, as long as you recognize that. For us, I think there was a balance, especially early on, of like making sure that everybody had the opportunity to participate, to step up, to figure out how much enthusiasm and time and skill they have. And then for us to settle into some leadership roles and to formalize those. And that's important for us. In part because we want decision-making to be transparent and accountable. And so we want to be really explicit about who has what kinds of power within our organization. That power often is like setting meeting times, nothing crazy. But I know as one of the early conveners, it was important for me to not just assume that I was a decision maker because I set up the meeting. And so defining those roles, figuring out how we get people into them formally was important, I think, especially for us who tend to be a little more communalistic and informal. And the step we're at now is building a strategic plan and budget, finalizing bylaws, really getting things written so that you can start to resource your work. So a strategy and a budget are necessary for getting grants, for example. We are also in the process of working with Shareable to become our fiscal sponsor. There will be a session on fiscal sponsorship tomorrow, if you're curious to talk about that. But really balancing that relationship building and formalizing is kind of my takeaway there. Anything else, Jason?
No, I don't think so. I think we could talk a little bit about some of our successes and outcomes so far. We've had some really great meetups up in Seattle. We were able to convene with a bunch of folks, learn about the tool share program that they do at Seattle Economy. Leanna and I were there for a couple of days to help them really build that out. I don't know, it's been a really great opportunity to just kind of connect. I think that's something we all need more of.
Yeah, and I mentioned this is a photo from that meetup. That was so fun. That Shareable's been a big sort of partner for us all along. They were coincidentally starting the Library of Things collab learning series as we were getting started. And so that was a good sort of catalyst for us to participate more formally, to identify session leaders, and then to take that over. And so we can talk more about that later, but we are going to be continuing to offer those monthly learning opportunities as the Tool Library Alliance. So Shareable's not responsible forever.
Yeah, sharing of a lot of those different resources is, again, really a priority for us. It's something we're working on our website, is getting a lot of those things together. Some of it's been shared through the collab, putting that, in multiple locations. Redundancy is the name of the game. So making sure any access point that you end up at is going to give you as much information as possible. So building out some things into a Google Drive that's publicly available. If anyone wants to find that, that's on our toollibraryalliance.org website. And then just to talk a bit about another similar model that's maybe a little bit less official at this point. The Portland Library of Things network is primarily there are 6 libraries that serve the city of Portland, and then another library just outside of the city, Rockwood Common, that just started. And as you can see from this map, we all have our own service boundaries. The ecosystem kind of evolved that way. And so because Portland has a pretty high transiency rate with different renters and things like that kind of moving throughout the city, one of our top priorities was to make sure people could continue to have access to tool resources as they moved. So if you, Leanna, let's go to the next slide. The main goals of our coalition was really first and foremost just to kind of check in and make sure that everyone was sustainable and supported. 2020, 2021, we had a lot of library closures, a lot of changeover in volunteers and board members and just capacity in general. So that's the main reason we kind of got reconnected. We also were kind of prompted by some conversations with our waste management metro to really solidify our network of taking in tools to make more of an impact there. And then our other goals really very similar to any coalition, just trying to enhance collective power, support each other, and reach more people through collective capacity. So pretty similar. We are all independent tool libraries. We're all nonprofits. Portland is all entirely free libraries as well, donation based. So that's one of the other reasons that building a coalition was really something that was top of my priorities. We are all volunteer run, including board members. There is one employee, I believe, at a couple of our libraries at this point, doing mostly volunteer management, and everything else we just kind of do with the capacity that we have. So really supporting each other helps us, kind of take care of some what can be expensive redundancies, and figuring out ways that we can really work together. We're also working on kind of expanding the general Library of Things network. Initially, this group started, if we can go to the next slide, Leanna, just a quick look at our timeline. We originally started with just tool libraries, set up a Google group, and really got in conversation after a first meetup, how much support and enthusiasm we found early in the year. And then Portland Kitchen Share, which is another one of our Library of Things, and the Lloyd Eco District is doing some small business lending for businesses specifically. We've got an old mall that is needing some extra support over there in that space and leveraging that resource as a community resource and doing some interesting things. So we decided pretty quickly that, you know, we really should be bringing more folks into that coalition. And oh no, you can go to the next slide. I would say one of the biggest outcomes for us, again, is just networking, communication. We were able to put together this map and some resources so that we could have this posted at every library in the city, every tool library in the city. We are making solid progress in getting these put into our municipal Multnomah County library system. And really the biggest impacts I think that we were able to do, we were Southwest Portland Tool Library over there in the red zone was really the last necessary bastion of adding full comprehensive tool library access for the whole city. They were well underway, but having some conversations with them and being able to share things like you know, insurance experience, tool inventory support, I think helped them open a bit sooner. I know for myself, starting Rockwood Common, we've expanded tool access into East Multnomah County, which adds about 140,000 people being able to lend. And we were able to, in just a matter of 3 months, really, get about 465 tools from our peer networks, a little bit of help from Seattle. And now we have a, you know, mobile box truck, so we can go out and do some much more far-reaching lending throughout the community, doing more advocacy work as well. And then being able to, you know, work together and get a little bit more recognition from, you know, some of our potential funders and supporters like Metro. We're able to work more with some other groups. I think some of the libraries had, one of the things that had come up was we are kind of an aging population a little bit. And so bringing younger folks in and being able to reach a more diverse group to really expand our impact and increase accessibility has been really helpful. We've been attending the African American Association for Homeowners convention twice in the last, or once in the last year, and then once this year. That was really kind of our kickoff. And that's been really helpful to really get, you know, in touch with homeowners who need these resources and can save a lot more money and make much bigger impact. And especially supporting those minority groups. And then, you know, an increase in, you know, social media and things like that. It's just difficult to do when you're not an organization that's really connecting with younger renters as much. Tool libraries do tend to be most helpful for homeowners. So getting folks out there and letting them know that we have, you know, other tools that are available for general repair, for crafting and making and all sorts of things. So. And then I think we've got some general kind of questions, discussion things. If anybody is in particularly drawn to any of these, feel free to chime in. But I think Leanna and I both really want to make sure we save some time for everyone to tell us, you know, what coalitions you have started or are looking to start, how we can support with that, or you know, what your outcomes have been so far. So.
And questions if you have them.
There's one question in the chat that Steve Bade was had. Steve, would you like to ask your question? Or
thanks,
yeah.
folks. Appreciate it. Liliana, Jason, Leanne, awesome presentation. By tool recovery, do you mean that thing you mentioned about Metro and engaging with Metro, your metropolitan waste management organization, to try to get more tools out of the waste stream?
Yeah, Metro has been doing some major restructuring with their, you know, waste prevention. And so getting in that conversation, again, with limited capacity and all volunteer run, it's difficult sometimes for a tool library to say, ooh, we need to send someone to those meetings and make sure they're involved. So we've been able to have more conversations with them and work with other partners like Ridwell, which is an organization that recycles hard to recycle material. We're able to communicate with them. Out here in Gresham, our waste management is a little different than Metro, and we're going to be doing a collection event of tools. And so really just getting more tools out of that waste stream and trying to make a stronger environmental impact.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Rosemary brought up a question in the chat that I think is worth discussion also. They asked if we had a foundation fund the development of the coalition. And it's interesting, there is a little bit of a catch-22 with funding, right? Where you need funding to make, to put behind people's time to do this kind of thing, or you're reliant on volunteers, which we are. And you need people to figure out how to get the funding, not just to do the grant applications, but to figure out what the goals will be, what the timeline is, what the budget is. And so in a situation where you have a nonprofit, for example, like if Shareable had taken this step, they might be able to dedicate staff resource to convening people and figuring that stuff out. But I think it's more common for folks to just kind of operate as volunteers for a while until they figure that stuff out and then mobilize to get funding to compensate people. Heather.
Yeah, great conversation. Heather Trum with Zero Waste Washington in Washington State. We're a policy shop. So when I'm listening to everything you all are saying, I'm trying to think like what could be a policy lever that could get you funding for what you're talking about.
Great.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one thing to rely on private foundations, but even so, you still have to rely on them, and that's not for sure consistent from year to year. And it would be way better if we had a consistent public funding source. So like the public libraries are funded by the city governments, right? Or county. So have you all seen any models, and I don't mean EPR because EPR is going to be a long time coming on this. We have EPR for packaging, and we're going to have a reuse fund if we can get it passed in Washington, but that'll be for packaging reuse, like bring your own container kind of thing. Any other places in the world where you have seen some sort of policy lever that has worked to provide consistent funding for this kind of thing? And it could be broader than just this exact kind of thing.
Maybe Fran has an answer.
Well, I don't have an answer that I think will be particularly helpful, but in the sense of like, obviously Wales has put, they're this, I think we're second in the world for recycling, so they have a lot of government interest, and we are partially funded by Welsh government. So for anyone who hasn't met me through any of the Shareable collabs, I'm Fran Williams. I'm from Benthyg Cymru, which is a network for libraries of things across Wales, and we support with help from Welsh government like interested individuals who want to start libraries of things up in their communities, to community groups, to local authorities, to all sorts of people, basically different organizations that are kind of like working on this sort of across Wales. So there has been funding, and it's been, thank goodness for Welsh government funding, because we have seen other funding dry up significantly in the UK. The main funder is like the National Lottery, which are big funders here, and lots of small pots, but it's a very challenging environment, very competitive. And so we're kind of doing similar to kind of what you're doing. We don't have probably as stricter rules because ours tend to be more wider libraries of things with like tools, kitchen, not many toy libraries. They tend to be like, they operate very much on like a free basis. Most of our libraries have like fees of like low fees, like but they are mostly that. Some have like membership models. But yeah, so I just wanted to mention that, say this is a great idea for the States. You could be huge. Think of all the tool libraries across America joining this alliance. What an amazing like impact it could have. So I just want to say, love to maybe touch base outside of this when there's more time.
Yeah,
So, thank you for a great presentation.
Yeah, hello@toollibraryalliance.org will come to us. And that's, I guess I could put that slide back up actually with our contact. Steve, do you want to hop in? Oh, you're on mute, dear.
Sorry, got excited. Service to underserved populations as a policy level, and there's an interesting slice of that that I want to call out, which is developing small businesses, new businesses. You know, if you can tell a funder at whatever kind of funder that you're helping people start their own little businesses with your tools or your commissary kitchen or your kitchen tools, that's going to be something that I think would, you know, be applicable in many situations.
I do also want to call out, Steve has been a big contributor to our conversations up in the P&W in general, Pacific Northwest, sorry, I mean abbreviations. We, the Google group that we set up through the Portland Tool Library Alliance is actually a bit broader because, again, when you have people who are able to participate and commit some extra time and resources, it's best to leverage those when you're doing coalition building. And so we've also, Steve and I have been working with the McMinnville Tool Library, which is just south of us, and really helping them out with a lot of advising and getting them set up. And they'll be serving, you know, all of Yamhill County. So, and kind of a newer thing for us because it's a lot more rural coming from Portland. But I think Steve had a bit more experience kind of working with a larger scope. And so that's been really helpful.
Yeah, and I want to highlight also the importance of planning your coalition geographically. So the Pacific Northwest is really different from the Mid-Atlantic, for example, in terms of municipal interest in funding in this kind of work. Part of why you'll see a lot of Washington and Oregon people here. But yeah, that's a challenge that we have is that, and an opportunity is that there is really disparate funding and interest across just the country. And so it's a consideration when you structure your coalition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the Rockwood Common Library, also we serve a lot of Gresham, which is separate from Portland itself. And even just across that very small boundary, the priorities and the funding is much different. So definitely figure out if you need to make a second coalition for broader discussions. Because keeping focused really, it's just really helpful. But, all right, thanks everybody. It looks like we're just about done with the breakout. If you want to reach out to us or reach out to each other, and you know, if you're not aware of the International Tool Library, Google Group's a great place to get started. That's where we do most of our initial chats. But thanks for your time.
Yeah, there'll be more tomorrow. Hope to see you again.
Thank you, everyone.